Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to more text classification using a neural network in JavaScript. Today we are going to be using this data card to classify a neural network to be able to identify spam messages. This data set has two classes. It has a class spam and a class ham. For spam, it says the message is spam, then ham means it's harmless. Okay, so I have already downloaded this code. You can go ahead and download it as a zip file, extract it, and bring it into the same directory where you have your code. Okay, so in here we are going to be reading our dataset. Okay, Node.js allows us to use a file system library. This helps us read files in our directory where we have our code or elsewhere. Sorry about that. I meant to import file system. Then I'm going to be passing in the parts of the dataset. Okay, so now that we have that, we are going to be getting a callback function. The first item in the callback function is an error. I'm going to skip that. I don't think I'm going to get an error for this. Then I have my data. Then in my data, I would love to pass this CSV file because I want to get the value of the classification and also the text, the SMS text separately. So in order to do this, I am going to be using a library called CSV parse. But before we go ahead and do that, let's see what's in our data. I'll clear all this out and I'm gonna say, okay, so we have a buffer. We can also go ahead and read this as UTF-8, and we should be able to see what's in there. Okay, cool. So we have our data set here. Then now what we want to do is we want to pass this CSV file, get the class of the text, if it's or spam. For this, I am going to be using a JavaScript library. It's called CSV parse. Makes things way easier for us. So I'm going to be installing that right now. Done. I'm going to import parse from CSV parse. Okay, so now that we have parse, we are going to be doing something very similar with how we read it with the file system library. We are going to say parse, then I'm going to be giving it our data as the first argument, then taking an options. We can just say trim true. This also gives us a callback where the first argument is if we have an error reading the CSV. I'm gonna skip that. If not, we have our rows of data. Okay, so cool. And now what we can do is let's look at what we have. Row index 0. Okay, let's see what's in there. Rows index 0. Yeah. Oops. Okay, so we have something called v1, v2. This is the header of our document. We don't need this, so we are gonna be skipping this. But let's see what's in index 1 instead. Okay, so the first item in the array of row is the class of the SMS. So this reads so we are going to be saying, let's destructure this. Let's say class. Actually, we can use that class. Let's just call it output for now, and let's say input. Then we'll say row. This should be at this row index. So let's loop through every item in the rows. Remember I said we're going to skip the first one, so I'm going to be setting index to 1. So while I is less than rows, the length I plus plus. Cool, so I can put this back in here. So now we know our output is and our input is the SMS. I'm gonna say let, because I would be transforming both our output and input. So for the input, we are going to be encoding just like we did in the last video. We are going to encode this input, then I'm gonna pass in the input. Let's abstract this function. Let's put it at the top. Const encode. In our encode, we are going to be reading the string. Then for the string, we're going to split it, so we get each character. Then we are going to map. Actually, we get each character into an array, so each character has an array space, and it's an array item. Then for each of those characters, we're going to be looking for its ASCII code. So we're going to say char code at 0. Then we're going to divide that by 256. This helps us transform the strings into numbers, which in turn then helps the neural network to easily understand what we are trying to help it learn. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of this. Then I'm gonna say for the output, if you are equal to ham, I want you to be classified as a 0, but if it's spam 1. Cool. So now that we have our input and output transformed into learnable values for the neural network, we are going to be pushing it into an array of data. So I'm gonna initialize that, then I'm gonna say data push input and output. Cool. Now we have our data set for the neural network. So the next thing that we are going to be doing is we are going to be splitting our data set into a training set and a validation set, or a test set. Okay, I'm gonna put in a little bit of comment here, get the n percent of data for training. So at the top, what we can say is the training ratio. Okay, so let's say we want 70% of our data to be for training, while we use the rest for testing. So we can say const training ratio stop index. This is where we want the training, the 70% of the training to stop according to the amount of items we have in our data. I'm gonna say training. For that, I'm gonna just give it a formula. I'm gonna say training ratio divided by 100 multiplied by the data dot length. So this gives us the amount of data it takes for us to get the total of 70% of our data dot length, essentially. So I'm going to floor that, and then I'm going to extract the training data. Then I'm gonna say a data dot slice start at the index 0 and end at this training ratio stop index. So this training data contains 70% of all the data we just transformed. Then for the test data or validation data, you can call it whichever you like, I am going to take the remaining 30% of the data we just transformed. So I'm gonna start at the stop index for the training data and end at the final index of our entire data. Cool. And now we can bring in our neural network and try to train our neural network on our spam or ham data set. Okay. Oops, I should import brain. Oh, you know what? I could just grab the neural network from the library. So I'm just gonna say neural network. Neural network. I have to pass in anything. Then on this neural network, we are going to train this entire data set. I'm gonna pass in the training data. Because it's a huge data set, I am going to let it train for just 100 iterations, and if possible, if it logs, I want it to log at each iteration step. Cool. So we are going to start training our neural network, and we'll continue from there. Let's train our neural network and see how it does. Oh shit, I didn't plan this video.